getting to the last section. And here we're talking about early Gothic architecture in France. And unlike all of the other styles that we looked at, we can actually trace a very particular place and a very particular time for the development of Gothic architecture and when it all comes together into this new style. And that's with Saint-Denis, which was built relatively quickly or very quickly compared to everything else we're going to look at, from 1137 to 1144 outside of Paris. And it's a pilgrimage church, so it built up like the Romanesque church that we looked at before. And the main person behind the design ideas for it, so I'm not talking about the technical parts, but the kind of meaning, is Abbot Suger, or Suger. So during this time, and we're going to kind of see if we were to continue on past the time period of class, you would see this happen more and more. The King of France becomes more powerful, and like a lot of leaders, supports the church in this situation. Charlemagne was consecrated at Saint-Denis. So by the king, by putting forward this like very new, very modern building and putting a lot of money into it at Saint-Denis, shows that they want to associate themselves with Charlemagne. So some of the elements of Gothic architecture, sorry about the low resolution. It's really difficult to find this picture. It is from Revelation. So like we had seen in some of the Romanesque churches. In Revelation, there's a quote, "And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof." And it goes on to talk about this kind of heavenly Jerusalem as being encrusted with jewels of many colors and clear as glass. So what Suger wanted to do is design a building that was this heavenly Jerusalem and bring it down to earth and let people go inside of it. So one of the big emphases of this was to have as much glass as possible, and specifically stained glass. And it has this effect where not only the stained glass itself is beautiful, but it casts these bits of light onto the rest of the walls of the building that makes it look like what they're talking about in Revelation. So that was his idea. I want to take this heavenly Jerusalem and I want to build it on earth. And they did so through a bunch of different, it wasn't just an idea, it's something that technologically had to happen. So if you compare Saint-Denis to Saint-Sernin, which is a Romanesque type of building, it's pretty similar. We see the same sorts of structures. But if you look at it, you'll notice that Saint-Denis is much narrower. And when we see the inside and the outside of the buildings, we'll see that there's much more of a focus of going upwards, and the interior spaces are bigger. So let's take a look at the inside. That makes it a little bit easier. So the elements of Gothic architecture. This is the nave and Rem Cathedral. And rib vaults were the big thing, because what they wanted to do is have more windows, and windows can't support buildings. So if you have more windows, you have to think of other ways to support the building. And rib vaults required less buttressing than the barrel vault. They were buttressed at the corner of the bay. So a bay is basically the square that is made by these X's. Leaves space for more window, allows lighter materials for web and filling. So when you see one of these buildings, they stand on these ribbed vaults. Everything else isn't necessary. They can actually stand on their own without the rest of the building there. So this allowed architects to do what Suger wanted to do, to create this heavenly Jerusalem. So you see a couple of design elements. The piers inside of here that are not as important structurally as they would have been in previous buildings, because a lot of the weight is going out to the outside of the building, which we'll look at in a moment. but visually they're pretty important. So they did a couple of things to kind of connect it to the ground and also to bring your eye upwards. So it's a heavenly Jerusalem. So the idea is when you walk in this building, you're being driven upwards. So it's like truly transcendent into a spiritual world. So compound piers, they were used rarely in the Romanesque, but they're standard in the Gothic. And they basically take your eye to different parts of the ceiling. So you can kind of see them leading upwards to different parts of the ceiling. So forms continue up the wall to the windows. So some of the elements of Gothic architecture, and these were practical, they were necessary so that you could get all of this window, but they became design elements as well, as we'll see. So one of them is a flying buttress. So basically the wall is right here, and then the buttress, instead of being embedded in the wall, sits out away from the wall. That allows more windows to happen here because basically the support is out here. So Romanesque had these thick walls, which limited the window space. The flying buttresses allow you to have very thin walls and lots of windows. And they're supported at the point of greatest thrust. So a lot of the energy from the arch is coming down here, and this thickness in the flying buttress is supporting it there. I'll post a video in the description for a video link for the description and then this video, and I'll give you some more details about the Gothic cathedrals and the technology behind it. So this is what it would look like while they're building the forms. But once they get these rib vaults on there, it'll stand on its own. That's the support of the building. Everything else is infill. So some of the elements of Gothic architecture are pointed arches. So theoretically, more like hypothetically, it could be raised to any height regardless of the space between the pillars. And these pointed arches allowed you to have really big spaces. And they, the designers of cathedrals got into a competition where they wanted to make bigger and bigger interior spaces and higher walls, ceilings in the nave. And the highest one still to this day is Beauvais Cathedral, which was a relatively small town at the time. And from the floor to the ceiling is 159 feet, 48.5 meters. And it's still the highest nave. So even with modern technology, no one has been able to build this. So I say, like, hypothetically, eventually this was kind of the limit that was reached. In the video, they'll talk about some of the reasons of why they were going higher and higher, and also how they related it to the book of Revelation. So what happened at Beauvais is after the building was, while the building was being built, part of it collapsed. And then after it had been built, another part of it collapsed in the middle of a church service, and people were running out of the building to prevent the ceiling collapse. So you can kind of see when you see Beauvais from the outside that it's just absurdly vertical and very, very narrow. In the video, they'll talk about like kind of the numbers behind this, but you can really see how things have changed and how thin and high everything is. So this is modern day Beauvais. It's now well supported. You can see some of the extra supports that are added with some modern technology on the inside to stop the thing from collapsing. But this is kind of like the peak of how high you can go with one of these buildings. So in some ways, the most perfect realization of this shining heavenly Jerusalem is Chapelle, which is a chapel that, if you're ever in Paris, it's next to Notre Dame. And it was the chapel that was specifically for royalty. So it's a little bit smaller, still a grand building, certainly, as you can see from the scales here. And when you look at it from the inside, it almost seems like there's no walls at all, like the walls are made out of glass. But remember, they're being supported on the outside of the building through these ribs. So this particular building was built to house Louis IX's Passion relics. The Passion means the events that led up to Jesus being crucified, and there's different ideas of, various items that are associated with that. One of these, this particular relic he had is this image of Edessa, where a figure had put a cloth onto the face of Jesus while he was being taken to be crucified, and the face was kind of like magically imprinted on the cloth. So, obviously not something you can prove or anything like that, but built around these relics. The other cool thing about Sainte-Chapelle is that it's been kept up with the painting, and it looks as it had when it was originally built. Most of the other cathedrals we're looking at, the painting is long worn off, so you don't get to see what it looked like when they were being used during this period. So this gives us an insight into how they would have looked, and all of the ones that we're looking at today would have been painted similarly to what we're seeing here in Sainte-Chapelle. So quite an amazing experience. People I've known that have gone to this said, pictures don't do it justice. Hopefully this picture comes close to doing it justice, but you can really see it's a sea of glass, and jewels, just light, light, light coming in everywhere. At the top, some symbols of French royalty, the fleur-de-lis. Been popular in the United States as well. And you can see all of these details. This picture is taken with a telephoto lens. So if you're standing in Sainte-Chapelle, you're not really able to see these details. So it's kind of interesting that these details are almost done for God, because human beings wouldn't really be able to see them. So Notre Dame kind of signals the next stage of development in the Gothic. And it came during a period where there was a revival of urban life. So urban life had never really, in what was once the Western Empire, recovered since the Roman Empire. But eventually, over time, we start to see more and more people in the cities, especially in France, where most people lived in rural areas. But we see during this time a revival of urban life. And this goes along with the French king trying to get more power and centralize power more. So, of course, you're going to want to build up cities. And the center of learning kind of shifts from the rural monasteries to the cathedral schools. So the king is trying to bring people closer to these urban environments, and Notre Dame is the result of that. And I should also say this is kind of the beginning of university systems in France as well. So the plan of Notre Dame, we can see that it's even more unified than Saint-Denis. It's this very unified shape. When you see it from the outside, you can see the cruciform. This is actually, all of this are flying buttresses, so all of this part is on the outside of the building. But still, the transept is very stubby here. And the double ambulatory continues into the aisles, so it allows people to get to the relics even more efficiently. It builds on these Romanesque innovations. So when you look at the inside, we can get the same idea. We have Notre Dame on the left, and then Durham Cathedral, which is kind of like the end of the Romanesque period leading into the Gothic. And we can see how we have a much more expansive interior space. It's more vertically oriented. Things are thinner. There's a lot more glass compared to what we're seeing in Durham Cathedral. And this will continue getting thinner, going upwards higher as we go along. This is the outside. So the flying buttresses by themselves, they're just thickened walls, so they look pretty ugly. So what they did, and we're going to see this continue, is I'm putting the air quotes up, add lightness. So in other words, when you add certain types of details like these, where there's holes punched in it and there's all these elements that are kind of pointing upwards, it distracts from the heaviness of the flying buttresses and makes everything look lighter and more graceful. So it's a way to cover up the kind of like crudeness of this technological necessity and make it into a very interesting design element. So when you look at the facade, this is the west facade, so there's facades on each part of the building on all four sides. They have what are called pier buttresses, so no flying buttresses on this part, just like the Romanesque here. There's 3 portals and 3 stories, and that 3 number isn't coincidental. Christians are really interested in 3s because they represent the Trinity, so the idea that God is one God in 3 persons, God the Father, God the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So you'll see 3s in a lot of places. Some of these small details are, again, adding lightness. We can see that all over here. They cover up the solid kind of front of the facade. So lace-like arcades and huge portals and windows break down the continuity of the wall surfaces so that the total effect of Notre Dame's facade is that of a weightless open-work screen. And all of this stuff is stonework. So this was definitely a good time to be a stone carver because there was lots of work to be had. You can compare it to the Romanesque facade where it's the same sort of structure. We can see the pier buttresses here, but without those details to lighten everything up, it looks much heavier, much more crude. So Notre Dame, like a lot of other cathedrals, it kept being built and they kept making changes to it. So we see much later styles. So in the South Transept, we're seeing a style that developed, a couple hundred years later. We have like a rose window. That's these windows with these like circular designs. And outside of it is what's called tracery. That's this carved stonework. It's not really holding the window in place. There's metallic structures that are doing that, but it does create cool design elements. So it's later in the west facade, so it's a development of Gothic lightness. We'll see all of these developments in a moment, and we look at some other cathedrals. So from the outside, how the stone tracery functions is basically to make it interesting from the outside. So when you're inside, you can see all of the images. On the outside, you see the stone tracery, so it makes it kind of interesting. And right here, you can kind of guess what kind of subjects people would put in here. So often you would see Jesus or Mary in the middle, and then you would have 12 circles around it. So they would do something like the 12 apostles, followed by 24 circles, so 24 elders, and they would kind of match up biblical events or persons with this type of composition. So on the inside, it looks like this. It's really hard to get details of these windows, but even if you were there, it would be a little bit difficult to see. So throughout the Gothic era, this develops. We go higher and higher and lighter. So this is Chartres Cathedral, and it's in what we call a high Gothic style. And again, these styles are kind of like later words that were used. They're not what people used at the time. People at the time would just say, this is modern, So beneath the apse, supposedly, are remnants of the robe worn by the Virgin Mary. So this was part of that kind of worship of Mary. And we see taller and narrow pointed arches of the arcade. So we're going up, and a development of a triforium, which are these 3 window spaces in between the floor and the top of the building. So this one, still a triforium, even though there's only 2 windows, or there's 4 elements here, but still the same idea. Responds are thin decorative pillars that visually connect the vault to the floor. So the structure of this actually goes to the outside of the building, but with these piers, we have responds that visually connect it to the floor, but not literally, because you don't really need these for the building. So this is Rem Cathedral, and we can see some of the developments that are happening. We're poking more holes to make it look lighter. We're bringing elements out. We're adding more windows, taking out sculptures and putting in windows instead. So again, it goes along with this adding lightness theme. So this is Rem before it was cleaned recently. Paris, French cities, like a lot of cities, are polluted and or were polluted in the past. So some of these were cleaned recently. So the portals are no longer recessed. In other words, the entrances don't go inside the building, they come outside. We call those gabled porches. And the idea with that is, again, to add lightness. And we get more and more details, perhaps too many details for some people. So this is what it looks like. We're going to look at some of these sculptures in the last lectures next week. And we have windows instead of tympanum sculptures. And you can kind of compare how much lighter the building is looking. Notre Dame looked really light compared to Romanesque buildings. But when we see Rem, we see just a whole lot of sky coming through there, a lot more lightness happening. So that's the development through time.